In 1993, a political scientist in the US, Samuel P. Huntington, wrote in the Foreign Affairs magazine, and in it he wrote that the fundamental source of conflict in the world will no longer be primarily ideological or primarily economic. He said that the Clash of Civilisations will come to dominate global politics, and the fault lines between these civilisations will form the battle lines of the future. At the moment I'm revising for a politics module for my course, and I thought that making a video about it to explain one of the topics might help a bit. So I've decided to make a video about the Clash of Civilisations, as I've just described to you. I hope it might be some use to some of you, or just interesting to everyone else. First of all, what is a civilization? I guess in broad terms, a civilization is a collection of cultures which all share something in common. So, for example, a Londoner may not share everything in common with someone living in Rome, but they're still part of the Western civilization. In a similar way as a Parisian being in the same broad civilization as someone from New York. You get this all over the world. So Western, you got Arab civilization, Asian, mostly Chinese civilization, African civilization, Latin American civilization. So why exactly has Samuel Huntington predicted that these civilizations will clash? In the article I quoted earlier, he wrote that there are 6 main reasons why these civilizations will clash. Number 1, there are basic, fundamental, stubborn differences between civilizations. These differences are formed by a collection of history, tradition, culture, language, religion, and these are formed basically different views on life and how people should live their lives, what they should worship or not worship. Because these views have been formed over hundreds, sometimes thousands of years, they're a lot more rigid than, say, the differences between communism and capitalism, which have only been around for maybe a few hundred. As a result, these differences are not very likely to change. They're so entrenched in the civilization that they won't change. Number 2, the world is becoming a lot smaller. People can interact with each other a lot more easily than they could 100, 200 years ago. You could just catch a plane to America and be there in 9 hours, or Australia, or the Arab world, or China. The internet also plays a large part, obviously. People can connect much more easily via the internet. And immigration is also significant in increasing tensions between different groups of people who may be from different civilizations but living together. Huntington, in his article, calls it an enhancing of civilization consciousness, where people are becoming more conscious of different civilizations, more conscious of the differences between each one. This links in with point 3, which basically says that a globalized world is separating people from their local and national identities. Religion has tried to play a role to fill this gap, to try and unite people of a similar religion. And we've seen the rise of so-called fundamentalist wings of most of the world's current religions. They don't want to lose their national or local or religional identity. Does that make sense? I don't know. Basically, religion is uniting civilizations. Point number 4, the prominence of the West around the world has kind of created an anti-Western attitude among the non-Western civilizations. Their desire to avoid Westernization has led to them returning to their roots a bit. For example, the re-Islamization of Arab nations and the Hinduization of India. Point number 5, I said earlier in point 1 that differences between civilizations are more rigid because of their entrenched history. This is also true when trying to think about who is in each individual civilization. You can't choose where you're born, and depending on where you're born, this can pose a problem. In contrast, in a political argument, you can choose if you want to be a communist, or you can choose if you want to be a capitalist. You can't really do that in civilizations. I mean, you can change your nationality or even have 2 nationalities. And even with religion, you can convert. But there are still places in the world where you can be executed for converting. And as I said earlier, people are more entrenched in their history. They are unlikely to want to just change nationality, religion, etc. Finally, in the past few decades, we've seen an increase in economic regionalism, where trade in geographical areas have increased at the expense of global trade. For example, the EU, North America, Asia have increasingly traded amongst themselves, and this has gone away to enhance and highlight cultural differences and bring together and unite the civilizations. Overall, it increases the shared culture that you have with your civilization. So because of these 6 points, the rise of a sense of civilizationship and a sense of community on a large scale between your civilization may lead to an us and them kind of attitude, and an inevitable, according to Huntington at least, clash of civilizations. We can see some contemporary examples of this. 9/11 springs to mind as the most obvious, but as well as that, the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan by the US and other Western states has been seen by some to be a campaign to spread Western democratic values. A third example, of course, the Arab-Israeli conflict, where the westernised Israel state has been under attack and been attacking the Arab nations around it for decades and decades. That is a classic example of this clash of civilisations that Huntington's been talking about. So yeah, that's basically what I had to say. If you've got any opinions on this, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Be interesting to see if I can get a conversation going about this. So if you've got anything to say, feel free. I hope you've enjoyed this kind of video. This is going to be on my second channel, which I've yet to create. Thank you. I'll see you next time.